Hi, Marcy.
Hey, Emma. Welcome, everybody, to Women Rabbis Talk Chevruta Study
Edition.
Edition. I'm Rabbi Marcy Bellows,
And I'm Rabbi Emma Gottlieb.
and we're excited to continue and maybe even finish the introduction today.
I dare not say.
so,
Okay.
yeah, what are you thinking about from last time?
I think last time, part of what was really interesting to me, and I guess sort of where we're picking up from, it was the the learning that Marmer shares with us about Mendelssohn and the ways in which um, sort of the pros and cons of our sacred texts coming to us in written form,
Yeah.
and the ways in which language and letters can limit the way we experience a text, and also ways in which language and letters can deepen the way that we experience a text. And I'm partial to the latter approach, but it's interesting to think about both of those things.
Yeah, I totally agree. That was the same part that stuck with me. This idea that um, like it locks it down in some way, putting, committing something to written language and saying these are the characters and these are the words that are going to define what this is, and then, like you were also pointing out, it also allows us to then have a base text, a pashat,
Mhm.
from which to interpret. And so there is this kind of interplay between written text and interpretation, and what that, the
Mhm.
relationship between the two.
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about, um, one of the sort of upsides of having the text locked in, I was thinking about the way that when I um, open a Torah scroll and show it to people who've never seen one before, that one of the things that often comes up, is that all Torah scrolls are the same.
Mm-hmm.
The size might be different, the style of the writing might be a little bit different, the material, the animal that was used for the parchment might be different, but the writing is the same. The letters are the same in the same order, and that you can scroll to a particular place where that we have one of those interesting bigger or smaller letters or interesting spacing or whatever it is. And even if you've never used the Torah scroll before, where that thing is going to be, and it's going to be there. And that there's something really powerful about the idea that you can go into any synagogue anywhere in the world and open a Torah scroll, and it's going to be the same as any other Torah scroll on the inside. And how beautiful and unifying that is for us as a people.
Mm-hmm.
And then it only really gets complicated when we start talking about understanding and interpreting that text. And then the way that we use those letters can be a barrier or a gateway.
Nice way to put it.
Mm.
Yeah. Once you're trying to figure out what does it all mean
Right.
and what is each word. And of course, what I think we're going to start talking about soon is the fact that, like, just having the consonants in the Torah still leaves it open for not just interpretation, but differences in meaning.
Mm.
Like, how do you vocalize a particular word? What vowels are there? Well, how do you punctuate? How do you decide what a paragraph is? Like, that's going to be a really interesting part of the topic as well.
Yeah, definitely. So we're picking up in the middle of this section about Mendelssohn. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. So, shall I read?
Please do.
It is hard to agree with Mendelssohn's assertion that emphasis on the performative is an effective protection against the perils of imprisonment within dogma. If religious observance is designated to enhance ethical sensitivity, there is ample evidence that it often fails to do so. Indifference and even brutality are not at odds with attention to detail. His second claim, however, that ritual is an antidote to isolation, is much easier to substantiate. During the discussion, Mendelssohn quotes an English work about Indian mythology to demonstrate the misunderstanding to demonstrate that misunderstanding another's culture can lead to errors in interpretation. His warning can still serve anyone striving to understand another religion or culture. He says, in judging the religious ideas of a nation that is otherwise still unknown, one must, for the same reason, take care not to regard everything from one's own parochial point of view, lest one should call idolatry what in reality is perhaps only script.
Ooh.
So, so there's something here about not trying to interpret another group's sacred texts without a solid understanding of that religion or culture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about the way that another common conversation that I have with people who are sort of at the entry point to Judaism or learning about Judaism for the first time, that often one of the things that we talk about when we're talking about God's name, Yod He Vav He, is how we got from Yod He Vav He to Jehovah.
Sure.
Not we, but how others got to that. And that really comes down to a misunderstanding of a scribal code, right? That we take the Hebrew letters Yod He Vav He that are God's name that we don't know the vowels of, but in a Siddur or in a like outside of the Torah scroll in a written text of the Torah, when we have Yod He Vav He, we put the vowels of the word Adonai underneath it to remind us that when we see that name, we say Adonai instead of trying to pronounce that name. So the vowels are like a secret code. They're like a prompt. And if you know, you know, right? Mm-hmm. And then Christian scholars came along and they didn't know that that was why those vowels were there. They just read it. And when you read Yod He Vav He with the vowels of Adonai, you get Yehovah.
Yep.
And thus, names of religions founded on a cultural misunderstanding or religious misunderstanding, right? So there really is, this really is an interesting point that he's making. And I would say also that it applies to our own, not just our reading of scripts from other religions and cultures, but also our own. If we aren't well versed in our own religion, we can also stumble into misunderstandings around these kinds of things.
Yeah, we probably mention that at least once every Saturday in our Torah study group at the synagogue, that, how much are we overlaying our own assumptions about what Judaism is, or even our questions about what Judaism is on the text itself. And it, causes many misunderstandings, or at least very particular interpretations that might not be what the text itself actually implied,
right?
Or wanted to say. This reminds me of a really fun project I had once in elementary school, where we had to come up with a culture and come up with artifacts of it, bury it in the school's courtyard, and then another group had to dig up our artifacts and try to figure them out. And we had to do that to another one. Yeah, wow. It was so great. And to see the ways in which the language we had developed or the symbols and what they meant, like, could be so incredibly misinterpreted was just fascinating.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it would be like if somebody from ancient Egypt, somehow traveled through time and arrived today and was able to tell us what we've gotten right and wrong about hieroglyphics. I mean, how interesting would that be? And how much, I wonder how surprised we would be to find that maybe we're not as right as we think we are about these things. Yeah. All right. Generations later, the kernel of this pluralistic approach was to be expanded by some to make the claim that any categorization of a foreign belief as idolatrous is no more than an admission of our incapacity to read the script. Oh, I was also thinking about when I took when I was a religious studies major in university, and I studied Hinduism for the first time, which, I'd grown up being told that Hinduism is a polytheistic religion.
Sure.
Um, and when you really get into the nitty gritty, and you start to learn about the structure of their gods, there is a way to understand their their gods as all being one God, part of one God, as being manifestations or different um,
Expressions.
expressions
Yeah.
of of a singular God who presents in multiple ways. And that's not so different from like the way that we understand the Kabbalistic tree of life, and like the Kabbalistic understanding of God as like emanating through different sphirot,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was like, oh, Hinduism, could be understood as monotheistic
Mm.
in this way, and it is by some scholars understood that way. So to for people who haven't studied it to say, oh, it is a polytheism is a like a actually like a really gross oversimplification
Right.
um, due to misunderstanding. So I think that this is really valid. This really happens in lots of different ways and times.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, taking us on tangents. The imagery and beliefs of other religions, even when they embrace views which seem antithetical to our own, are not graven images to be smashed, as expressed persuasively by Naomi Janowitz, who says, every religion has some objects that are understood to represent divinity formally. That is, every group interprets some signs as being iconic forms of representation. Religious texts may attempt to regiment these modes of representation by establishing whose interpretation is most authentic. But it is, in fact, impossible to fix the meaning of a symbol unless it is dead. On this understanding, idolatry is the claim that other people have the wrong way of interpreting their images, which is, by definition, an impossible case to make.
Excellent. And, yeah. And it's assuming that somehow yours is the only right way. Everyone else is wrong. And not only that, you're going to tell them what their own symbols mean.
Right.
The
Like, can you
chutzpah.
imagine? Yeah. Can you imagine if someone came to us and tried to explain how we are wrong about um, the Hanukkah and why we light it?
Sure. And that's, of course, something that Christianity did with the Torah and with the Bible by saying that certain things didn't mean what we had always claimed they meant, but
Mm-hmm.
instead were foreshadowing Jesus, for instance.
Right.
And so, yeah, reinterpreting fundamental parts of someone else's religion can really go in a very different direction.
Deeply problematic and offensive. Don't do it, folks.
Don't do it.
Just don't do it. Employing the image of a script, employing the image of a script serves an invitation to consider the relationship between the local and parochial on the one hand, and the universal on the other. It is part of an implicit ideology of pluralism at the foundation of Mendelssohn's approach. Mendelssohn's thoughts on hieroglyphics, numbers, and alphabets bear the traces of contemporary theories of language, with which he was well acquainted. They also imbued with traditional Jewish sources and ideas. They are also imbued, yeah,
Mhm.
with Jewish tradition and ideas. His capacity to combine these two areas of expertise and to embody a melding of the two explains his significance as not just an exemplar of modern Jewish thought, but one of its creators. Mendelssohn contends that a ritual act lives in the present and is gone. Its ephemeral nature provides a bulwark against the reification and deification, which the world of hieroglyphs and symbols is prone to yield. In his remarkable theory, commitment to a prescribed set of practices offers a guarantee against submission to desiccated doctrines and gross idolatry. So part of what he's saying is that like language, the description of a ritual is a dead thing. Doing a ritual is what keeps it alive and relevant.
Yes. Yes, that's how I read it as well.
Keeping the embodied script alive through commitment and repetition paradoxically allows for a rich and ever changing explanation. Mendelssohn, a Jew of great learning, employs the image of a living script to offer Jews at the cusp of modernity an approach, an alphabet, and a theology. The Jew does not follow the script, the Jew lives the script.
Oh, that's so great.
That's a beautiful sentence.
It comes back to why, whenever someone says, why do you do this? Why do you do that? And you can come up with at least 3 or 4 different reasons why.
Right.
But perhaps the better question is how.
Right. And sometimes the why that we choose from the the way it was passed down to us or what we were
Mm-hmm.
taught as the why is not the why that we find locked into the script.
Right.
Or maybe an evolution of the why that we found locked into the script. And so the written down why is not always the why that compels us or the why that keeps the ritual alive.
Mm-hmm. And it can shift, and it should.
Right.
It can really, the meaning of it can change.
Mm.
I remember Rabbi Larry Hoffman, our wonderful teacher, explaining that, when you talk, and I know I mentioned breaking a glass at a wedding in a previous episode, but that he had said the only evidence of it in one of our ancient texts is somebody throwing down a glass in a moment of, like, was it anger or surprise at a
Right.
wedding? And it was
Right.
throwing it down, and it had nothing to do with, the temple or blessing the couple in any way. It was, do you remember more about that?
I don't remember more about that specifically, but I think there are so many examples of when people talk about why they do something and then you trace it back, that you find that the original impetus for that thing isn't, like even thinking about like Murano Jews, who light 2 candles in their basements on a Friday night and don't know why, right? And they're like, they do it because their grandmother did it and their great grandmother did it. And it's important to their family. It's a family ritual. They don't have a why beyond that. But then we know that that's a Shabbat ritual,
Right.
and we know otherwise for that ritual that are meaningless to those people
Yeah.
but deeply meaningful to other people. So that's really interesting, right? Like you could give them a written text on like why we light the Shabbat candles, and that's not going to mean anything to them because that's not why they're doing it.
Do you remember that wonderful, I don't know if it's a joke or a folk tale about the pot roast? Where it's passed down in a family that when you're making a pot roast, you cut off one end of it on this side and you cut off the other end on this side. And that's what makes a good pot roast. And
Mm,
that's what we do in our family.
right,
And then, somebody
right.
finally tries to trace back why. And it's because, because I had a pan that was
Yeah, the
only this
pot wasn't the
small.
other pan wasn't big enough. Yeah,
And it doesn't necessarily, so meaning is very
yeah,
fluid.
right, right. And sometimes going back to the source material can bring us new meaning, right? Like
Sure.
can bring something alive in a new way, and other times the meaning um, extends beyond the page.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see how we do in this next section. I'm excited about this next section because it starts with Petakovsky, who when I was a first year rabbinical student um, in Rachel Shabbat Beit Halachmi's liturgy class, I was convinced that I was going to grow up to be a liturgist because she just brought it so alive and I was just so in love with liturgy the way that she taught it. And I was like, I just want to be a liturgist forever. And a lot of what she taught was built on Petakovsky's teachings. So I'm always excited when I come across Petakovsky. I'm like, oh, Petakovsky.
Mm-hmm.
Nerding out a little bit. Okay. Would you like to read about Petakovsky,
I
Marcy?
would love to read about Pentecost.
All right.
Heirs of the Masoretes. Jacob Petakovsky, professor of liturgy and theology at the Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, entitled one of his works, Heirs of the Pharisees. His argument was that, at its finest, the project of Reform Judaism might be compared to the epoch making efforts of the Pharisees, which gave Judaism the tools required to survive the upheaval wrought by the destruction of the temple. It is easy to critique this kind of reading of history, whereby one compares oneself with a great hero of a bygone era. Ultra Orthodox Jews, one can speculate, see themselves as the true heirs of the Pharisees, and Reform Jews as feckless schismatics. Questions of historical accuracy are not our concern here. What matters is the nature of our self description. Whom do we aspire to resemble? It is a dull game to look at every great Jewish figure through history and claim them for one's own team. But it is of some interest to ask, as one's eyes range over 3,000 years of Jewish history, whose heirs do we think we are?
I'm laughing because I do that a lot. I'm like, the Pharisees were the original reformers, and
Hmm.
these folks were the original reformers, and Jesus was like a reformed Jewish rabbi. Like,
Yeah,
we love to claim, right? But it's true that it's not always. I don't think it.
totally accurate.
I don't think it's dull, but it's maybe. But I can appreciate that we're not the only people who do that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it helps to look back and see, like, where were these ideas also present?
Yeah,
Um, all right. Well, Marmer's vote goes to the Masoretes.
right.
While debates about their historical provenance are ongoing, it is generally agreed that the Masoretes were preoccupied with the question of how the biblical text should be vocalized. Hebrew, after all, provided not a true alphabet, but rather a list of letters, almost all fundamentally consonantal,
Yeah,
like they're all
consonantal. They're
consonant
all consonants. Yeah.
in character. When placed together, the letters call out for vocalization. And then there's a quote: the Jew searches with his eyes for inaudible roots in order to flesh them out with his breath. The Greek picks the sound from the page and searches for invisible ideas in the sounds the letters command him to make.
Hmm.
So we need vowels in order to make the words work,
Right.
right?
But I think, yes. And I think this text, what Pedakovsky is saying in this text is that um, the Hebrew language, we can't apply vowels without doing some pre-interpretive work, right? Like we apply the vowels once we've decided what the word means,
Got it.
right? Whereas in Greek, they and many other languages, you get a word that is fully formed, and then you have to figure out what it means.
Mm. The invisible ideas that the sounds and the letters command him to make. That's what Greek does. Got it. Okay. The Masoretic text of the Hebrew Bible adds vocalization to the letters, actualizing the potential inherent in the words. Two distinct theories concerning the vocalization of the Hebrew Bible have had significant currency over the centuries. One, represented by Moses Mendelssohn, argued that Moses received the Torah complete with all the appropriate grammatical notations. In his view, the essence of the oral law is that generation passed to generation the secret of the true way in which to enunciate the Torah. This act of transmission is intimate and verbal. It is the oral law that allows the written law to come alive. In Mendelssohn's account, it is only after some time that this most perfect arrangement comes unstuck. From around the time of Ezra the scribe, the original true version of the biblical vocalization was reconstructed by experts. By this account, the Masoretes were engaged in an act of restoration and were guardians of the truth.
Right. So this is like the way that it was taught to me, this approach, that the oral tradition passed down how the Torah was meant to be vocalized, and then some of it gets like lost or distilled or confused in the exiles,
Mm,
and then in the post-exilic period, they decide that they need to write it down and lock it in because you know, as the Jewish people is getting dispersed, it's getting harder and harder to keep the text, to pass the text orally in a complete and accurate way. And so part of what the Masoretes do is that they codify the text.
Yeah.
Uh, they codify the vocalization of the text, and to the best of their ability with what they've inherited.
So it's suggesting that the pronunciations and the punctuation, et cetera, maybe even the trope, right, was all originally there. It was just passed down orally. And at some point, it was locked down in a
Right.
written way,
Right.
as opposed to it being a group later that's like, let's figure this out once and for all.
Right. That maybe there were like multiple, like I think what we're gonna see, I guess we should read it, but that potentially the second version or the second option is that there were multiple ways, like that they have the consonants. So there were multiple interpretations
Sure.
of what it meant, or multiple traditions, maybe even multiple ways of singing, chanting, and then the Masoretes choose choose a version and lock it in.
Yeah.
Do you want to keep
Okay.
going?
Let's keep going. In the 14th century, Bachya ben Asher ibn Halawa offered a different understanding of the process of vocalization. In his commentary to Deuteronomy 7:2, he wrote, here's the quote: "We learn from this how great is Torah, since it can be interpreted in a variety of ways, so that even one word can be understood in several ways according to the vowels." Right? We see this in Midrash all the time.
Yeah.
As the vowels move, so the meaning changes. For the letters are the body and the vowels are the spirit. Ooh.
I
For
love that.
this reason, we have been commanded not to add vowels to the Sefer Torah, for the meaning of each word is defined by its vocalization. With vowels, it has one meaning, but without them, a person can understand many wondrous things. And this is something that's a little more unique about Hebrew, and people may or may not understand that changing the vowels changes the tense. It changes the, is it a noun? Is it a verb? Is it, there's so many different things that the vowels can help us determine in terms of its
The
meaning.
gender, the
Yeah, the
gender all the
gender.
time. Yeah, all these things. And it really is interesting. I never really thought about this before, but it's really interesting to think about how the Masoretes and the other folks who were involved in codifying the Torah as we know it today, um, somewhere in that process made the decision that even though they locked in a version of how the Torah should be vocalized, they didn't um, they didn't lock it into this Torah scroll. So we have this system separately that says this is how you should read it, and it's generally agreed upon that that's the pshat way to read it, right? The like that everybody accepts that as like the first way to read it, and then you get into other interpretations.
Yeah,
But they made the choice not to put the vowels into the Torah scroll,
that's such a great
right?
point. So it remained, yeah,
Which leaves it
open in that way.
open, right?
Yeah,
Which, like if they had put the vocalization into the Torah scroll, it would be much harder to play with the letters and the vocalization the way that we do, um, because we understand the vocalization to be at least in some ways um, a latter addition to the
right,
text.
right. My favorite example of this is from the Akedah, where it's the, Shvulachem po im hachamor is the Masoretic text, where it's sit here, you two guys who came with us for me to go sacrifice my son, sit here with the donkey, right? And I remember learning that you could equally vocalize it am hachamor, where it's actually an insult of the people who are coming, the two boys who are coming with, that you're donkey people. And
You
it's
donkey
actually,
people, wait here.
yeah. And that
Yeah.
there was like an interpretation like that, where it was maybe an insult about whatever culture they came from, especially if it was maybe Ishmael. Really interesting how just that one vowel changes the meaning
Wow.
so much.
Yeah. Boy. Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh.
All right. So If, as one theory holds, there is a single right answer to the question of how the text was originally vocalized, then the inclusion of vocalization is a quest for the retrieval of authenticity. If, however, the text invites multiple vocalizations, the process is more creative than conservative in nature. I like that one. I
Yeah,
like that it's more creative.
yeah.
These two approaches to the origin of the vowels reflect different understandings of tradition. In the first, our role is to approximate what the text has always meant. In the second, we are called on to strive to understand what the text might or must mean for us.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to take over?
Sure. Some examples of the interpretive possibilities offered by this indeterminacy are in order. Moses has a theophanic, a theophanic. Moses has a theophanic encounter in the in the tent of meeting, described in the book of Numbers, using a using a peculiar vocalization. So he has an encounter with God, a theophanic encounter. Um, and the text that uses the peculiar vocalization is from Numbers 7:89. And the English is, when Moses came to the tent of meeting to speak with him, with God, he heard the voice speaking to him. And the Hebrew is, Uvavo Moshe el Ohel Moed ledaber ito, vayishma et hakol midaber elav. So now he's going to explain what the peculiar vocalization is. So the word midaber, the word that we've read vocalized as midaber, is not vocalized in the way one would typically expect, which would be medaber, right?
I think so.
Rashi explains the phenomenon thus. It's hard to read this out loud without vocalization. Mem daled bet resh is the same as mitz. So like medaber is the same as mitzdaber. He heard the voice uttering itself. It is out of reverence for the Most High God that Scripture speaks thus. The voice was speaking to itself, and Moses would listen in.
Yeah. Wow. Right. Because it's turning it from what you would assume would be a PL to a hitpa'el. So it becomes reflexive.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the voice is speaking to itself. Meet daber.
Right.
It's so
So he
interesting.
heard, right. So the way that we vocalize that word, midaber or midaber, changes like where the voice is being directed, whether the voice is being directed outwardly towards Moses or whether the voice is being directed to itself and Moses is just overhearing it.
Mm.
The difference in vocalization has significant theological implications. So even though we're just changing, literally, like if we're writing out these two words, midaber and midaber, it's the difference of one dot.
Yeah.
Right?
One dot.
Right. But it has a huge significant theological implications. Rather than God speaking to Moses, God is portrayed here speaking to God's own self. Revelation as sacred eavesdropping represents a fascinating and somewhat surprising read of a classic source. That's pretty cool.
Sacred eavesdropping. I
Sacred
love
eavesdropping.
that.
But you have to like imagine that like God understands that Moses is listening, right? This is like permitted sacred eavesdropping.
True. True. It's not something secretive that's going on or forbidden. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. The difference in vocalization. Oh, I read that already. Sorry. Okay. So then the Masoretic version of this same, oh no,
different one. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to get another text. The Masoretic version of Exodus 12:17 reads, Ushmartem et hamatzot, ki be'etzem hayom hazeh, chotzeti et tzivotechem me'eretz Mitzrayim, Ushmartem et hayom hazeh ledorotechem chukat olam. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. You shall preserve the unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your ranks out of the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day throughout the ages as an instruction for all time. We read this not only when we're learning about Pesach, but also as part of the Seder itself.
Mm-hmm.
In early Midrashic work, note is made of the fact that the word mitzvot,
Right. You just did it.
what we
Yeah.
what we just read as mitzvot.
Or
Oh
matzot,
no,
right?
or matzot. Yes, sorry, right. So unvocalized, we would often read this as mitzvot, right, out of context.
Right.
And tzadik vav taf. But in this text, or elsewhere, it could be vocalized as matzot, unleavened bread, right? So it could be vocalized as matzot or mitzvot. And then a quote, Rabbi Yashia says, you should read, and you shall keep the commandments, just as you should not miss the timing of the matzah and cause it to ferment. So should you not squander the mitzvah and let it ferment. If you have the chance to perform a mitzvah, do it immediately. So by changing the word matzot to mitzvot, we have an entirely different text and teaching.
And they're almost maintaining both of them or retaining both of them, right? That we're going to talk about the mitzvah of the matzahs. And we're going to kind of hold both of them together.
Right. Fascinating. Here, the rabbis propose an ingenious teaching based on the similarity between two words. Keeping matzot and keeping mitzvot are presented as parallel activities, the former a specific instance of the latter. To this day, in modern Hebrew, to squander an opportunity is expressed in keeping with the ancient midrash as to let it ferment. Cool. We're almost there.
Oh my God, really?
Let's wrap this up. We can
Wild.
do it. Another biblical verse whose vocalization transforms its meaning is Psalm 119, verse 126. Eight lasot ladonai heferu toratecha. It is time to act for Adonai. Since they have broken, you should break your Torah. Ooh. Breaking your Torah. Powerful. Okay. This verse is subject to a broad range of interpretations, many of which depend on whether the fourth word of the verse should be vocalized as haferu or heferu. So changing the vowel underneath the hey. Some radical readings understand the verse to be a license for overriding existing law for the sake of a pressing moral imperative.
So you should break your Torah.
Right. As opposed to
they have broken.
Like a less strong.
Yeah. Is it something that's already happened in the past?
Right.
They've broken your rules, your laws, or is it an idea of like the time has come, you have to break your Torah?
Oh, okay. I misunderstood how the translation was. So the options are either since they have broken your Torah or you should break your Torah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. A last example is taken not from the Bible, but from a modern Jewish thinker, offering a surprising reading of a classic text of medieval Jewish philosophy. The opening to Maimonides' Mishnah Torah reads, "The foundation of all foundations and the pillar of wisdom consists in knowing that there, in Hebrew Sham, is a being and that it is the first being." Michael Fagenblatt noted that in an essay on the name of God. Emmanuel Levinas reads the word as Shem instead of Sham, thus rendering the pillar of wisdom consists in knowing that the name exists and that it is the first being. Levinas is acting here as an heir of the Masoretes, judging how a text needs to be read and suggesting a creative misprison. Heirs of the Masoretes are thus bound to read closely yet expansively with attention and intention in roughly equal parts. I love that, attention and intention. Driven by anxieties and buoyed by hope, guided by a sense of what Jewish theology might mean and how I might try to express it, inspired to embrace an alphabetical structure prevalent in Jewish culture since biblical times, challenged and stimulated by Mendelssohn's notion of Judaism as a living text, and encouraged by precedent to find tradition in interpretation, I offer 22 elements of a Jewish theology. Ooh,
I know, it's so exciting.
We made it to the end of the introduction.
Oh my gosh. So then there's a whole lot of footnotes. Do to do do to do 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 do. Ba da 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 da. And we're gonna get to the first word next time, probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Of aspecularia,
Aspicularia.
prophecy and pluralism. All
Sounds
right.
like the title of a Harry Potter book. Harry Potter and the Aspicularia.
Aspecularia.
Sorry to those for whom Harry Potter is no longer.
Yeah. Appropriate, meaningful. Yeah.
We need a better book to attach Aspicularia to. Sorry about that.
Hmm. Please feel free to suggest another book in
Please do. Please do.
the comments.
We need a cultural replacement for all things Harry Potter. Sad. Um, all right. Well, this has been fantastic. I'm so excited we made it through the end of the introduction. We said we would, and we did finally.
We did. Oh my God. So next time, everybody has to tune in because we are going to actually begin the letters themselves.
Beginning
Yes.
with Olive for Aspicularia.
Aspecularia.
And if you don't know what Aspicularia is, you've got a week to Google it.
Or just wait and we'll explain it next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.